So there is only one LTL 3000. It was specifically designed and built for Hitachi to their specifications.
Okay.
If we had another customer tomorrow come to us and say, we would like you to build us an LTL 3000, we'd say, absolutely.
Welcome to episode 39 of the Crownsmen Podcast. I am your host, Jared Downey. My co-host is Gowdy Molina.
Good morning.
Good morning, Gowdy. We had a couple technical difficulties this morning.
Yeah.
But we're rolling. It happens. It does happen. This is coming off of a Thanksgiving weekend. How was your Thanksgiving weekend?
It was good. It was good.
Good. I don't know where you stand on cranes, but they're pretty awesome. Rory, who some of you know from the show, he pops his head in every now and then, and he's a big fan of the big construction cranes and lifting, the mobile cranes and all that. So he chased after Lampson and we have Kate Lampson, who's third generation. She is the director and PR of PR and communications for Lampson Cranes. And she's going to be on our show today. Discussing the business, discussing some of the projects, to give you an idea of the type of projects they've done. T-Mobile Arena, CenturyLink, I'm just calling it Stadium, but it's actually CenturyLink Field. And they did the stadium in Australia. That's where the Olympics were held. So some of the projects they've been on are amazing. We're going to focus a little bit more on the heavy industrial side. But just to give you an idea of what they've got this massive crane. It's called the LTL 3000. It's just massive. We're going to talk about that in about 15-20 minutes. Before we do that, we have sponsors.
Yes, we do. Like always, a great thank you to all of our sponsors. We couldn't do the show without you. First off, we have Ashdown Capital. They work with businesses looking to increase or access working capital, purchase equipment for growth, undertake new development, or to invest in real estate. They help their clients every step of the way, and you can visit them at ashdowncapital.ca, whether it's looking to invest in real estate, working capital finance, equipment finance, or construction and development. Definitely visit them, and you can visit their. I'll put their phone number at the bottom there, so you can take a look at what they can offer for you.
Yeah, they're a new sponsor for us. Ashdown, Brad Kindle, who I've known for years now, we've become friends, and I'm very careful about plugging financial sort of companies because it's obviously it's a very intricate thing of people's business. You want the right people,
right? But
they are good people. And I've met some of the people that Brad has brought into that company. They're good people at that company. So any sort of, I guess it's fitting that we have a crane company and we have them on to help you set it up. They've done some good projects. We've actually worked with them a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, and who's next?
We also just a little plug-in here for the Crownsmen specials. Remember, we have just rolled that out. We've only had two so far, but a few more coming, I believe. If you're looking to promote your services, products, projects, anything that you'd like to kind of focus on, Crownsmen specials is definitely the great place to do it. It's just specifically one-on-one interviews all about you and your company and what you're trying to accomplish. It's a little bit of a shorter setup, but it definitely focuses a little bit more on you. If you're looking to start up your own little web series or that, definitely come on. You can contact us, info@crownsmen.com, or visit the website, crownsmen.com.
Okay, thank you very much, Gowdy. Hello, Kate.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Jared?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Welcome onto the show.
Thank you for having me here today.
Good. Have you ever done the long form before?
I have not. This is new for me.
We hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Dragging everybody out of the industrial sector into the public eye is essentially what we do sometimes.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. You've got to see some of our episodes, so you sort of know the format. We have some things we want to discuss, and then and sort of see where those conversation goes. The first thing I'd want to get into is just so people understand the size, the scale of what Lampson Crane does or can do. what are some projects that kind of come right off the bat to mind that you've taken?
So some of our most recent projects right now, we're working at Plant Vogtle down in Waynesboro, Georgia. We're on the Alvin W. Vogtle electric generating plants unit 3 and 4. We've been down there for about 18 months. We've got our LTL 2600 2BC, so that's a 2,600 ton machine that's down there. And our Transi-Lift has performed various lifts over the last 18 months. Namely, in March, we did a 750-ton containment vessel top head lift. So a good size lift on that particular project.
Do you have a picture of that one? I think I saw. Was it that one?
You do.
Yeah, okay.
You do.
It's
the one with the American flag prominently flying in the front of it.
Got it. There it is. Okay.
Who took that picture?
That was that would have been, I believe, that came from Southern Nuclear Operating Company.
Oh
so
yeah. They
great.
sent
They had
it
a
over to you.
photographer on
Yeah.
site. Yes.
I was like, 'cause that flag didn't just accidentally fly in front of the camera. It's a great photo though. Sorry. So how big is what they're lifting?
So that is 750 tons.
750 tons. And it's getting. And what is it again?
It is called a containment vessel top head.
Wow. I'm just looking at just the pure amount of cables that are attached from the crane to the piece that it's lifting. That's just unbelievable. Do you know how long? I'm sorry if I'm going to ask you questions that just random questions that pop into my head. Do you know how long it takes to lift something like that and place it in?
It varies based on what we're lifting that day. It could take several hours. It just depends. I don't know how long that particular lift took.
That must be something though. Do you have video? Do you take videos and stuff of it very much? It's so slow, I guess. So you can't really it's a lot of just standing there with the camera. I guess.
That's a great question. A lot of the sites we work on, we're not allowed to take any video or any photographs. Sometimes we're lucky from our clients; they'll give us pictures to use, and sometimes we can do time-lapse videos.
Yeah.
And when we're allowed to, then yes, we use those for marketing purposes, or we post them just to share with our audience and customers.
People are fascinated by cranes. It's one of those things that people just. My nephew, he sees them when he around, and he just goes crazy for them. There's something, I don't know what it is about them, but people just go crazy for them.
Well, there's these mammoth pieces of equipment, right? And when you see them in the skyline, it kind of gives you a sense of, oh my goodness, how small am I compared to this?
Yeah.
And look at what it can do. Look at what it can construct and build.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something. What's another project that you sent us a couple pictures of? I
did. So the other one I sent you is from Chevron Richmond. We did a project down in California back in 2015 to 2016. It was a reactor regenerator replacement, and again, it was an LTL 2600. It was equipped with 344 feet of main boom, and then that top portion is called a jib, that second set of boom, if you will, and that's 161 feet. You can't really see the counterweights as well in the at the back of the crane in this picture, but there's 5,200 kips of counterweight to help keep the crane stationary. And that maximum lift for that regenerator head was 500 tons at 270-foot radius.
Wow.
At a 270-foot radius, so what's a football field? 300. Rory, what's a football field? Rory.
He's thinking.
Oh, he's looking it up.
No. He was thinking. He was processing.
No, I can't see his head, so I didn't know if he could hear me. So that's so it's almost the length. So it's boomed. It can boom out at that weight as almost the radius of a football field.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. Our crane has a pretty good reach.
That is insane. Wow. And so like at a project like that, like does that crane just come in for that particular lift?
Typically, if someone's going to rent our Transi-Lift, our proprietary product, they'll rent it for a duration. Sometimes it's a short duration, and we only do one major lift or a few big lifts. Other times, they'll bring the Transi-Lift in. So, like at Plant Vogtle, not only are we doing the big lifts, but we're doing a lot of small ancillary lifts
so
as well.
you're doing a contract, and then you supply the cranes that are needed.
Correct.
Right. That must be, so I guess probably a big part of the job, other than obviously building the cranes, is there's large component of trying to figure out what cranes are going to be needed in all these major projects. So they're not providing the list to you, I'm assuming. You're providing which cranes need.
We provide the cranes that are needed, but we do, and during the bid process, you find out, what is the scope of the work? What is the equipment needed? How much manpower do you need? What is the duration of the project?
Yeah.
All of those things, taking into account, truckloads of equipment that you're bringing in and the route they're going to take, the setup time to assemble the crane, how long it'll operate for, and then the tear down and disassembly of it and the shipment out.
Is that like I was in the pre-interview, I heard like there's some of these projects like cranes will take 20 truckloads to move just that crane in. Is that
So
right?
typically with like the Transi-Lift, it
Yeah.
could take anywhere, depending on the model, because they come from 350 ton all the way up to 3,000 US ton. So something like the LTL 2600 could be 85 to 100 truckloads to move that crane.
Just
Wow.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Holy.
You see them going down the highway, these parts and pieces of that.
Yeah.
Do you know how, sorry to keep pulling out these random questions for you, but like how many times would this crane, like a crane this size, go into service in a year? Like it must not be, it must only be a few times a year because you got to transport it, take it down, put it back up.
Right, and again, it depends on the project duration. I mean, this crane was on site, for over a year, but we might have had another project going on in another part of the country with another Transi-Lift.
Yeah.
So it just depends, and part of, what's unique is we find facilities where we can store our cranes that are closest to the last job site.
Right.
So then we only have to mobilize it once to the next job site, so we can react very
Oh,
quickly.
so the cranes aren't going to a central location. They go to multiple, are they your locations or do you just choose different locations?
Both.
Both.
Sometimes they go back to, so we have 9 offices in the States, and we have about 4 big major laydown facilities in our yard. So sometimes it goes back to a specific yard. Maybe there's maintenance or repairs, painting that needs to be done. But if the crane is ready to go, we'll look for a piece of land to rent. We'll call it a laydown facility.
Yeah.
We'll rent the land. It'll rest there. And then when the next project comes up, we get our trucks. We also own a trucking company called Columbia Pacific Transport,
Oh, okay.
which my grandfather and grandmother were very, forward thinking when they started this business, where we haul our own equipment.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time the Transi-Lift is moving with CPT.
Oh,
Right.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess it would make sense if you're going to have trucks that take 100
Keep it
loads.
in-house.
Yeah. No, it's
But we do work with third-party brokers too from time to time.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of flexibility in an industry like this, isn't there? Because it's and every project's probably a little bit unique, especially, I was going to ask, are these, like I noticed, these stadiums and things, and stadiums in themselves, because there's different designs and I'm sure they're all unique. Are you doing, does Lampson do a lot of like the skyscrapers and that, or are they doing a lot of these industrial commercial type projects, or are they doing like residential skyscrapers and office buildings and
So
things?
great question. Most of what we do is more the industrial commercial because we use our crawler cranes. A lot of what you're seeing, say downtown Seattle, there's
Yeah.
a lot of tower cranes in the
cranes, yeah.
skyline right now, building condos and high rises. We have built. We actually just did the Hyatt Regency downtown Seattle
Oh,
in the last couple of years, and that was a big project for us. That was a really nice back in 2017. And we used one of our conventional crawler cranes on that one. So while there were a ton of tower cranes in the skyline, you also had our crawler crane there too, which was nice, something a little bit different.
Yeah.
I just so a crawler. Actually, I want to get into because the LTL 3000 that's a crawler, right?
That is a crawler.
Can we bring that up, Gowdy? That awesome specimen of crane.
Here we go.
So the LTL 3000 is a 3,000-ton machine. This is a picture of it at our test facility in Pasco, Washington. It was built specifically for Hitachi for their program over in Japan. Obviously, when Fukushima happened with the earthquake and the tsunami, that put things on hold over there. So they own the crane. We keep it here at our laydown facility in Pasco in our test yard. We exercise it for them on a regular basis, quarterly and annually. They come over, we do the inspections, we run through the wire rope, we make sure that the fluids are good, that the track pads are moving on our crawler transporters, that everything's operating efficiently. And eventually they will take delivery of the crane when they're ready to.
Oh, I see. So they ordered it, and that's on hold, basically.
It is based on how their nuclear program has been put on hold.
I know
over there.
Lampson's a private company, but I would love to know the dollar value of that crane.
Come on over and take a tour.
Where are you going to put it? I know you want it.
Yeah, I want that crane. You could literally have a house and just build a house in the air and have it suspended from that.
You could.
You could, yeah. That would be very cool.
Do you make multiples of those? Or is that like a special design? Like you build an LTL 3000. Is there one or is there 5 of those things crawling around?
So there is only one LTL 3000. It was specifically designed and built for Hitachi to their specifications.
Okay.
If we had another customer tomorrow come to us and say, we would like you to build us an LTL 3000, we'd say, absolutely. They typically take about 18 months to build.
Yeah.
This one took a little bit longer at their request, but yeah, we could turn one of those out for somebody in the next year and a half.
Okay, so it's only upon request then?
Typically, and I mean, we have over 30 Transi-Lifts in our fleet that are used anywhere in the world at any given time. And those are, easy to assemble and disassemble, and they can move by barge, they can move by ocean-going vessel, and they move by truck. So they're very transportable to be wherever they need to be at any given time.
Okay.
So going back to Gowdy's question, do you build any cranes that are just, you're building them because you think there's going to be a demand, or are most cranes built in anticipation for a specific project?
Most of the cranes that are existing in our fleet are existing. The LTL 3000 was a new step for us. It is the biggest in our fleet. It was built for Hitachi.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something. Oh, sorry, did we go over the specs of that? What does it actually lift?
We have not.
It's something absurd.
So it's a 3,000-ton machine, as I had said, that it can lift. This one is currently equipped with 400 feet of main boom, and it has a 120-foot jib on the top of it. The maximum boom length would be 520 feet with 320 foot of jib. Kind of a fun fact that I like to share is the system uses 20,000 feet of 2-inch diameter wire, so 20,000 feet of wire rope, and the wires alone weigh 64 tons each.
Oh my! Wow.
And the maximum counterweight at the back of the crane, so you can look at the base on the very back, is 6,500 tons.
If you need any company to come out and do filming or anything, we'll be there. We will be there.
Well, thank you. That'd be great.
Happy to do it. It's unbelievable. Do you still, you've been with the company quite a long time, and it's family and all, but are you still amazed by the product?
Yes.
Do you still look at it and go, wow?
Yes. And it's times like these where I'm learning from people, that know about our industry, that enjoy our equipment, that are like, what you do is amazing. What you build is incredible. These mammoth machines. And it gives me a new appreciation because I grew up in it. I've been working in the industry since I was 14 years old. And I grew up, driving through the yard with my dad on Saturdays and hosting dinners at our home with customers in the evenings. And then working, college and high school breaks. So to step outside and see it through somebody else's eyes, through a different lens, is really refreshing and fun for me.
Well, I think one thing that from just there's the awe factor, but for me, the other thing that I like about the cranes is that it's sort of interwoven into all industries. Not everything is like that, right? Because, I mean, what industries, I mean, you cover so much, but what are your main industries that you're covering?
So we do a lot of oil and gas, the mining industry, new stadium construction. We do bridge work. We do a lot in, we're doing liquid natural gas. We're doing a lot in that space now, both in Canada and in the U.S. And then, of course, we do a little bit of, like I said, some hotel work.
Yeah. What is there one that sort of dominates? Do you sort of a company like Lampson, do you get known that you're really good at doing these 3 industries, like you know it, or is it a bidding process that it comes out for tender and you're bidding against your other 3 or 4 companies that are up for the project? Is that generally how it works?
So it's twofold. We are known in the industry for being very specialized, and we have specialized equipment and expertise. We have over, we've been in business for 73 years now. Having said that, even though we are well known in the industry, we bid all the time, and we come up against our competitors all the time. Every bid is different. It's new. you could be bidding against the same, competitor you did last week. It could be somebody else this week.
Right.
So you're constantly staying up to date on everything.
And you're bidding global, right? I mean, you're doing U.S., like you said, like you do LNG work in Canada and that as well?
We do.
Yeah. Are you able to talk about any of those, like name some of those projects that you've done?
I'm going to err on the side of caution, but I mean, they'd be some of the prominent LNG projects that you have going on in British Columbia and Alberta and other parts. We do a lot of work up at Fort McMurray as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw you had a note. What are the notes of some of the projects you worked on in Canada?
So we've done Vancouver Island Naval Base. We've worked the Vancouver Convention Center, the Golden Ears Bridge, the Fairview terminals. I mentioned Fort McMurray, and we do potash as well.
Yeah. So you're doing, and then you have offices in Australia and Australia, Canada, but you've done projects everywhere, right?
Yeah, so we have 9 offices in the States, 6 in Australia, 1 in Canada, but we do work all over the world. In the 73 years we've been in business, we've worked in over 55 countries around the globe, to include Japan, Korea, Venezuela, Brazil, Scotland, England, Russia. So lots of different countries, lots of different projects.
Did you get to travel to those? Were you able to swing that over the years?
I've been to a few different countries. I was actually there to negotiate the sale of the LTL 3000 with Hitachi, which was a historic, monumental time in my life to be there with my father and our head engineer.
Yeah.
We've had a long-standing relationship with Hitachi for over 30 years. They're incredible friends of ours and customers. We work very, very well with them. So to be there to witness that and be a part of it was really special for me. I did spend about 2 years working in Australia in our home office there in a small town called Toronto. Believe it or not, there's a Toronto, Australia as well. And really learned a lot from our managing director and his wife and the staff down there who really became like friends of mine and still are today. And then the cultural aspects, right, of living and working in that country and learning from the Australians was really a unique time. So I've done a little bit of international travel. I hope to do more as I get older and get some more experience.
Yeah.
So it's good, though. Every day is different. I'd say that's one of the things I enjoy most about working in the family business. I know we talked earlier about family businesses and how unique they are. I could be in a hard hat and boots in the morning giving a tour of the LTL 3000, back at my desk that afternoon, doing an ad for an industry magazine, and then in a dress and heels representing the company and the community at a reception that night. So you just kind of jump in wherever you're needed. You wear a lot of different hats, and that makes every day exciting and new.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. It's like having 3, 4, 5 different jobs, so it's never boring. You can never say your life or your job is boring.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You have about that. You have about 3 or 4 different jobs. Let's give a shout out to Savinaw, our sponsor, and then I want to get a little more into your personal background and career and everything like that. So
perfect. All righty. So our other sponsor, Savinaw Equipment. If you need anything from pumps to conveyors to electrical, go to the leader in used equipment, Savinaw Equipment. And you can visit them at savinawEquipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day. Awesome.
That's a family business, too. That's my father's company.
Oh, very good.
So, yeah, it's a small world. No, but it's great growing up in a family business. It's you mentioned too, and we're going to get into it in a second, that it's good when you get to work in both independently and with the company, because then you learn sort of how other worlds, if you just work in the family business, you do end up in a little bit of a bubble. But when you get to experience other parts and travel, like getting to work with Hitachi, I mean, I've been to Japan, just traveling. I mean, it's very unique as a culture. It's one of the few places I've gone. I went you don't see that sort of the North American Western civilization hasn't taken over that culture. It is Japan, and it's So it's unique. That must have been, just doing business must have been interesting there.
It was incredible. I mean, the whole experience, you know,
Mhm.
having grown up knowing Hitachi in the US and working with them and having them in our home and at our office, but to go to Hitachi City, to see where they're from, to go to their office, to see how business is conducted, was really completely different. My cousin was living over there at the time with her family as well, so I got to experience a bit of their
Wow.
culture and, you know, got out and saw what Tokyo was like and went down to the docks, to the fish markets, and did some of the
It's
tourist
unbelievable.
things, saw some of the
Yeah.
shrines. And to your point, it's just it's a beautiful culture. Everyone is so respectful, so kind, so open and warm. It was wonderful.
Yeah, but don't try to get on the train when the doors close.
That's right.
I tried to do that.
And pay attention to your stops, because if you get off at the wrong time, it's tough to find the
It's gonna
next
be
stop.
just a long journey back. Greta, you have some questions about sort of the background.
Actually, it's good that you're kind of talking a little bit more about you, because that's where I come in. I was kind of snooping on your LinkedIn profile, but there's not very much there about you. So I want to know more. You were talking about you went to University of Boulder, correct? But you also went to did you say UW?
Seattle
No,
University. So I grew up in a family. My parents were both graduates of Gonzaga University, great Jesuit college. Several of my family members and friends have gone to Gonzaga as well. I kind of broke the mold. A lot of my family friends went to Seattle University, and that's where I wanted to go. And I went, and it was an interesting year. I'm glad I had the experience, but I knew it rained from like October to May that year. And it was just a different college experience than I was expecting. So I transferred to CU Boulder that following year. Absolutely loved it. I mean, how could you not when you're in
It's
the
such a
great
beautiful place.
outdoors? It's a gorgeous
Yeah.
campus. You have the Flatirons and Chautauqua Park there, and you hike. It's very healthy and outdoor activities. The ski mountains are just an hour and a half away. Plus, we have a branch office down there. And so my uncle and his wife and our employees have been there a long time. And so I would get to go down on the weekends and visit Uncle Buck and his wife Patty and visit some of our office staff. So it was always very close to my heart that I was still connected to the family business, even though I was so far from home, right? So yeah, I graduated CU Boulder and then immediately moved back to the Tri-Cities. And I think it was the next week I went to work for my father, which was really good and a fun experience. And I did leave for a period of about 7 years. I wanted to get out, work for somebody else, prove that I could do it on my own and have something to bring back to the table. And I'm really grateful for that experience. I learned so much in the time that I was gone. Having said that, I've been back now about 12 or 13 years, and I love it. I love every single day that I get to go into the office, whether it's challenging or it's exciting or it's fun or it's a basic day at my desk where I'm just getting caught up. I enjoy every bit of it.
Yeah, wow.
That's wonderful. Because you said you left, did you find kind of, I don't know, a little bit hard to kind of, because you grew up in this industry and it's your family business and that, did you find it a little hard to be away from it for so long?
I think that there were times that I really embraced doing something completely different. So, for instance, I lived in Santa Barbara for several years and I worked in the events industry, which was a lot of fun. It was totally different than what I had ever done. After that, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina by design, and I went to work for a third-party brokerage firm. And it was when I was working in North Carolina, and there was a lot of new construction going on, similar to what you're seeing in Seattle right now. And I looked around and I noticed there were a lot of booms in the air, but none of them were Lampson Blue. And that's when I realized I enjoy working for other people, but I really wanted to get re-involved with a family business. And I knew the best way to do that would be to relocate back to the Tri-Cities, to southeastern Washington, and start from the ground up and really learn every aspect of it and spend time with the men and women who have known me since I was 5 years old and have watched me grow up in the industry and really learn from them and, impart, any bit of wisdom that they're willing to impart upon me. Take it in and learn.
What's one the biggest highlight for you working in this industry?
I think that because it's such a unique industry, there's so many different companies that you work with in different sectors. The people in the industry are great. I have to say, we compete with a lot of different companies, but we're also friends with the owners of those companies. People, again, that I've known since I was a little girl, that I've grown up in the industry with. And now my age group are starting to become the movers and the shakers. And in some cases, they're starting to be second and third generation. And it's just a really great industry as a whole. So I think the people and the work make it fun for me and make it exciting for me to get up every day. We were talking about the trade shows. It's great to be able to go to ConExpo or MineExpo or PowerGen and see these people, once a year, once every 3 years, and really catch up with them and hear how they're doing, how their families are doing, what's new with their business or their industry. So I think that's part of what makes it really fun.
Yeah.
With industry changes, through political aspects of it and that, what is a major change that you've seen that has affected Lampson?
So obviously there's changes in administration over the years at the presidential level, and that has a big impact on the construction industry. Liquid natural gas, coal, nuclear, just power plants in general, and taxes, regulation, what you're allowed to do environmentally on site. All of those things have an impact on the projects that you bid, how you bid your work, how many competitors you're going to have in the industry, how many jobs are even online at the time. A lot of the time you'll see it in the oil and gas industry or even in the mining industry. The companies that are doing the work are not spending the money, so they're not hiring subcontractors like ourselves to do the work.
Yeah.
There were some lean years in there, 08, 09, 2010. Those were some pretty lean years, and we're coming out of that now. But I would say politically, changes in administration has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
I had an exterior company in 2008.
So you understand.
Oh, I understand. I was at the time I was maybe 19 or 20. And we'd had the company that I've said this on a show a few times. We had a company that had been around for 20 years. So the first day we were there, the phone rang. And then 3 years into it, the phone just didn't ring.
Mm-hmm.
There was every now and then an elderly lady would phone us and ask if we could clean something for her. It was just like it was gone. The whole industry was gone. But for a company like yours, that must have been a huge impact in those times. 2008. Projects just stopped, or I don't. If this is too much information to give away, at a time like that, there must have been payables that all of a sudden just disappeared, and did you run into that kind of thing?
No. So what's one thing that we're really fortunate about, and this goes back to my grandparents when they first started the business. We're very diverse. We buy, sell, manufacture, and rent cranes. We also have not just the heavy lifting portion, but we have a heavy haul portion of our company where we do work with specialized trailers, so real big heavy haul projects. We have rigging and engineering services that we offer, and then of course we have our trucking transport company that I talked about. So when one sector might be down,
right,
the other is up. So let's just say that it's a lean year and we're not doing as much manufacturing. There might be a lot of rentals going on, or maybe the U.S. is performing, subpar, but Australia's going gangbusters, or Canada's doing very, very well. So we've been fortunate that because we are diverse, when there are lean times like 2008, 2009, where you really saw the wind industry, change, and you saw the oil and gas industry change, we were able to still maintain because of all the facets of our business.
Right. There must be, and your father's the CEO.
He
right?
is, yes.
Bill?
Bill, correct.
Bill Lampson. There must be this fine line, or maybe it's actually not that fine in your industry, because growth to build a crane and invest in that, it's a huge investment for the company. And you probably, growth is probably a very tricky thing in this business, because if you grow too much and then you end up with too much on the ground. And is that sort of one of the balances that you're always looking for then in this business?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, because you do see it happen in our industry where, a company might expand, their operations in terms of the locations of operations that they have with depots. They might expand the amount of people that they bring on board. Right now, you see that our market is very, very saturated with equipment, which means that everybody is really trying hard to bid the same projects, and the competition are lowering their rates to become more competitive. When you have a situation where the market is flooded like it is now, it's very difficult to move equipment, and especially when everyone's offering the similar services.
Right, yeah. And it's sort of, so you maybe, if you don't expand as aggressively, you might miss out on a little bit in the really high years, but in the low years, you don't get hit as hard because you're able to distribute out your assets. Yeah.
And my father and grandfather have always done a great job of expanding our fleet when it makes sense. You know, we tend to buy a lot of used equipment versus new equipment. And we've been very lean. You know, a lot of our competition has thousands of employees working for them. We only have 300 people worldwide.
Yeah, I saw that. It's quite small for the scale that you work at. It's sort of a funny thing that's going on here. So you have 300 employees, full-time employees.
Correct.
But you're working in how many offices did you say again?
So we have 9 in the U.S., 6 in Australia, and 1 in Canada.
Wow.
And we're constantly moving equipment back and forth around the U.S. Sometimes, you know, we even send equipment up to Canada or down to Australia based on what the needs are.
To be able to run I think the word you used earlier was lean. Like, that's a very lean operation. That I would guess then when you say, and I asked you off air, so I know the answer, but the audience doesn't. I asked if your father was an active CEO. To run a company like that, he must be involved at every level still.
He is every single day. You know, he's turning 70 this year, and I say that because I'm so proud of him and everything that he has done. But it's hard for me to see him getting older because I remember when he was my age and how much he was already doing in the organization. He's been in this industry for about over 55 years. He has learned it from the ground up. You know, he started pulling weeds at, you know, the office yard, and he worked his way through high school and college, really started traveling with my grandfather after graduating college, married and had us kids. And really, you know, our family grew the business. It was really big for us in the 70s and 80s. That's when the Transi-Lift became known and became a global crane, and we started doing global projects. But yes, it is really interesting to see the transitions between the generations.
Yeah. I wonder what are some of the. Now, I've worked in a family business for years, off and on a little bit more, but. What are the challenges when you're running a family business? Where do the hiccups happen? Is it the communications? You kind of know where to poke somebody, like, or is it just trying to get stuff done, and it's a different sort of thing that if you were, you know, at a company that you just work there, you provide a proposal and write it out. Whereas family, it's a little more like you got to sit there, look the person right in the face, and like, this is how I need to do this. Like, what sort of the hiccup that you run into with family?
Well, so fortunately, my father and my brother and I all get along very, very well. And, you know, I have uncles who have worked with the business since I was a little girl, who are still very involved and are very key ingredients in the business. And so obviously there's a delicate balance between family dynamics there. But we all get along, which is great. I think the transition between the generational changes, what has worked so well for the first and the second generation, and that transition, what's working between the second generation and third generation, but also staying current with modern technology, understanding, you know, how the equipment's changing, how the industry standards for safety are changing, you know, what are the needs of your employees going forward, and seeing, you know, up and coming younger generations and what do they need. So I think that's kind of where the challenges lay. But communication, to me, I go back to communication all the time. You know, you've got to be able to communicate with your family members and with your employees and with your customers. I think that, you know, ensuring that you're staying relevant while you're evolving in the industry, but having a really good, sound business philosophy is important. my grandparents' philosophy was treat your employees well and never lose a customer. And I still believe in that philosophy today. I think it's challenging, again, with the transition between the generations and the newer generations. But that's what makes it exciting. That's what is so great about working with the people around you.
Yeah. You do see it when you go into a company. Sometimes you'll see, essentially, you see the next generation. They kind of wander out of the office. You're like, oh no. You just see it. You can sense it. And then sometimes someone like yourself, and I've seen other people, and they come out, and you're like, this person is into it. They love the business. They have all the knowledge from the past generations, but they've got all this the new stuff, the new tools. And it's a pretty, when you have that, I think then the future's pretty bright. But you can't really, it's kind of a flip of a coin whether people are going to be into the business or not, right?
It can be. And fortunately, I will say, we have amazing people working with us at Lampson. We have second and third generation families,
Really?
of combinations of fathers, sons, and daughters who have been with us from the beginning. So that keep your head down, work hard, get the job done, don't show up late mentality is still very, very prevalent.
We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. Was something going on this morning?
Yeah,
we're gonna blame it on the construction outside.
there is construction happening outside.
It was right when I was saying that you were so early, and then things went wrong on our end.
I know. We had a little difficulty. I think we filled up our storage there. So
I see.
yeah.
We have outside, speaking of construction, which obviously you're very involved with, this is a heritage building, so they can't touch the building, thankfully. So we're pretty secure in this location. But outside, they're just digging up the street. So it was on Friday they started, and they're hitting the pavement because they're breaking up the pavement to put in new pumping lines. So the whole building was we're like, this can't happen if we got guests coming in.
Yeah.
Like, is this going to be going on for a month? Because it's not going to work. So fortunately, it's pretty quiet this morning. I wanted to, there's family, there's running the company, there's the relationships with companies like Hitachi. I mean, we have companies that are the lifeblood. We serve them every month, and you just have to do everything you can to maintain that relationship. But then you have your community and the organizations that you're a part of and things like that. You mentioned you're part of, and I actually, is it a chamber of commerce? It's the Association of Washington Business. Is that Chamber of Commerce, or is it like a Chamber of Commerce?
You can think of it as the state's Chamber of Commerce and the
Okay.
Manufacturing and Technology Association for Washington State.
Okay. And you're actively involved in that?
We are members. We've actually been members of the Association of Washington Business for 53 years now.
53.
Wow.
And it's an amazing organization. It's the oldest and largest statewide business association. There's nearly 7,000 members representing 700,000 employees throughout the state. And 90% of AWB members employ fewer than 100 people. So truly talking about small business throughout the state.
Wow, and that's so these so an organization like that, why is it important for a company like Lampson to be involved in that type of organization?
I think one, because it really helps you understand what the important things are happening in business in Washington State. So the research departments that AWB has are education, employment law, small business, environmental policies, government affairs, taxes and fiscal responsibility policies, those kinds of things. So it keeps you understanding what are the new policies, what are the new laws happening in Washington State, how is transportation going to be affected. So being a construction company or a transportation company, you want to pay attention to it. But also just being a part of an organization where you're meeting other manufacturers around you and other small business owners, and really forming those friendships and those business bonds is important. And then, of course, supporting the organization who's out there, really being the voice for small business in the state. Yeah,
because you had a couple stats. You said 90% are fewer than 100, but then there's another stat. You said that 50% are fewer than 10. Right? 2 to 10 employees? Is that?
more than half of AWB's members employ fewer than 10 people.
Yeah.
So just
right,
really
yeah.
highlighting the small business aspect of it.
Yeah. So would a company like Lampson, would they be one of the bigger well, 90%, yeah, of them have less than 100. So you're one of the bigger companies.
Well, so it's interesting. That's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting question, because when you look at the manufacturing companies in Washington State, so like Lamb Weston, the Boeing Company, Phillips 66, so those are big employers, right?
I love the Boeing building. That's another pet thing of mine is the Boeing building. Yeah.
Great company. I
Yeah.
just spent some time with a group from Boeing just a few weeks ago at the AWB Policy Summit. But so, I mean, there is both large companies and truly small business. We're 300 people, and really in the Tri-Cities in Washington State, we're only 120 people. So we're probably, a little bit on the smaller side.
Right. It's interesting in an organization like this, when you meet with a Boeing, or is it is it a lot of it networking, or when you're sitting there talking to a Boeing and their perspective on the industry, do you walk away from that going, oh, that's a way that we could deal with this challenge that we got over here, or there's an opportunity there? Like, is there a lot of value just spending the time with these companies and getting to know them?
100%.
Yeah.
When I participated in their manufacturing summit a few years ago, I was fortunate enough to be asked to be one of their panelists, and I served on there with one of the Boeing employees, Susan Champlain, and speaking with her just a little bit beforehand, finding out what was happening with Boeing in Washington State, some of the challenges that they were facing were similar to some of the things that we were going through as well, especially when it comes down to the idea of a statewide income tax and B&O taxes that we already pay, and this idea of a capital gains income tax. You find that, in regulations too, you find that especially small businesses and even big companies are really going through a lot of the same things.
Yeah. It's so important. And you run into some companies that are closed off, but I'm realizing the longer, especially doing this show, how much these companies are learning from each other. And you said about the other crane companies, even their competitors and their friends, and we see that all the time on this show, like all the time, is these companies, I mean, they're competing for millions of dollars in a lot of cases, but yet they're very much allies. They're part of, well, you see it in the LNG industry. They're not really competing because they've got different spots, but they've all come together for the BC LNG Alliance. I think you saw that episode with Brian Cox.
I did.
And it's I remember one of our first shows in the mining industry, because mining used to be notoriously independent. Like, this is our road that we're building to our mine. And you're seeing now that they're realizing this isn't going to work anymore, because just to get that road approved is a huge, so you better get 2 or 3 companies together.
Yes.
Does that kind of thing, when a mining industry does that, that also affects you, because now there's more products to bid on and things like that. So has there been industries over the last several years that have been hit or hurt that now you've noticed that direct impact has come back on you? The industry specific, not as a company as a whole, because you said about you to shift around, but you were in this business and then that dropped by 70% because that industry got hit.
Sure, the oil and gas industry, for instance, obviously with the economic downturn, in the U.S. back in like 08, 09, you saw a lot of refineries go offline. They just weren't spending the money to do replacements, like regenerator replacements and top head lifts and things like that. So when they're not spending the money, they're not hiring people like us to come in and do the work. Fortunately, you're starting to see the oil and gas industry spending more money. Liquid natural gas, you're starting to see a lot more of that pickup in the U.S. So and again, it's cyclical, right? I mean, it depends on who's in office at the time, and it also just depends on what's happening globally, what's happening with other countries. How's Canada doing? How's Australia doing? What's happening with Japan? All of that has an effect on markets around the world.
Yeah, you mentioned offline too, though. You're doing things like the windmills and that. You're putting up some of those and that. I was going to ask, actually, when you're doing, so Lampson, they're unique because you're saying you're buying used equipment, but you're manufacturing new. You put contractors, operators who are operating your own cranes on there, but you're also renting out cranes as well, right?
So yes, all of that is the answer. So when I say that we bare lease cranes. Say that you came
Bare
to
lease,
me
yes.
and you said, hey, I want to erect a wind tower and I need a crane to do it. I'd say, great, let me rent you one of our cranes bare, meaning you supply the operators, you supply the rigging, you take on the liability and the responsibility for it. Versus with the Transi-Lift, that is our proprietary product that we manufacture from scratch at our location in Eastern Washington. We supply the engineering, the rigging, the safety director for that, and then we have 4 people that operate that crane. So you've got 2 in the
Wow.
crawlers at the base, you've got 1 in the hoist operating, and then you've got a flagman and a superintendent. So 5 total.
5.
And then you've got the ancillary staff, and oftentimes there's other ancillary cranes on site that we also supply. Those we might bare lease, but we always, almost always, unless we're selling a Transi-Lift to you, if we're selling a Transi-Lift to you, we would bring your personnel over. They would receive in-classroom training as well as OJT on the job training. They would learn how to assemble the crane, how to operate it, and how to disassemble it.
Wow.
We would then ship it to your country, and we would go over with you to go through that process again. So that it's typically it's 6 weeks to put a Transi together and about 3 weeks to tear down. But typically when we do something like the sale of a 2600 or a 3000, we're on site with you for a couple of months.
Wow.
Same when you come over to learn from us. You might send your crews over for 2 to 3 months.
What kind of staff are you? Is that so? These must be crane operators, mechanics, engineers. Like all those people are part of.
All part of the team.
Wow.
We all work together to make these projects happen and make sure that they happen efficiently, under budget, on time, and safely.
That's
Wow.
amazing stuff. Where do you where does it go? Do you as a just sort of as we wrap up a little bit, your 3rd generation. You mentioned your brother's involved in the company as well, and sort of how do you how do you grow and take on new opportunities, but without stretching yourself out? What's your outlook on that? As you are a global company, and you've got some major competition. I mean, we've been at trade shows and talked to some of the other companies, the crane companies, and they're heavy hitters in the industry. How do you sort of manage all that? You sit down and have a discussion about how to grow or stay stable, or however you look at that. In an industry with so much competition and so much fluctuation between one industry, LNG pops up here while oil and gas suffers here and all that sort of thing. How does that all get managed?
Every day you look at it and you think, okay, a couple of things. One, we are fairly diverse and we have, we span the globe. So, do you want to expand physically? Do you want to add any more offices? Do you want to add any more people? Is it prudent to do so? 2, buying equipment at the right time. We tend to buy a lot of used equipment and absorb that into our fleet. We're actually doing something right now where we're remanufacturing the old 4100 and 4600 Manitowoc cranes. We're calling them the Lampson Millennium crawler or ring attachment cranes. And they've been great for us. That's been a way that we've stayed ahead of the rental market. And we're breathing new life into these old machines, which are fantastic. I mean, they're a workhorse. These pieces of equipment are incredible. They're what built America. And now we're adding new technology to them and faster line pull and better safety features. So, looking at staying relevant within the industry with technology, and then, really thinking about the future. How did my grandparents set up this company? What has my father done to continue to make it successful? And what do my brother and I and my sister, who's also involved in the business, how do we make sure that we remain relevant and ahead of the curve and not just set it up for future success for our generation, the 3rd generation or the 4th generation, but the 5th, 6th, 7th, and beyond? What does that look like for us? And what works in today's current conditions?
Yeah. It says something about your grandfather and father to 3 people involved in the company. It states something. I've never met him, but it says something about him and your grandfather being able to bring all that in. So, and people that are passionate about it. So, we're going to wrap up, and thank you very much for coming. It's fun to see someone, your 3rd generation. You're passionate about the company. and just so much interesting information. Plus, I love cranes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank
A
you,
pleasure
Kate.
meeting you as well.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Gowdy.
We're going to sign off right here, Gowdy?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I could do a whole series on cranes. It's just fun. But thank you very much for watching. Gowdy, where can people watch the show? And
Everywhere.
everywhere.
No, definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got an episode every week. We just launched last week, episode 38. This is
Yeah.
episode 39, and so on and so forth. Oh my God, we're almost at 40.
Yeah.
They're really piling up.
Until I see other people with podcasts, it's got like 500 podcasts.
I
I'm like,
know.
My goodness. Wow.
Someday. We
Yeah.
we will get there.
Well, we've got 5. Oh, and one thing, we are going to, I should have brought this up at the beginning of the show. We've got
That's right.
Mining Now. We've partnered up with CIM, which if you've followed the show, you know that's where we launched CIM. But now we're partnering with them, which is just going to be amazing. We're doing Mining Now. We have an audience that loves the show because it's sort of all over the place with heavy industry.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a certain amount of people that go, we want to hear about our specific industry. Mining Now is our platform to go specifically at mining. It's mining experts, mining technology, and it's going to be really exciting. We are launching that at MIMO up in Kamloops. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be exciting.
That's what is it? October 20th
Yeah, that's coming up
to
next
the
weekend.
22nd, 23rd, or something like
Not
that.
next weekend.
This weekend.
Wow. So that's going to be, we're just launching out, that's going to be 5 episodes in 2 days. There's going to be 5 episodes produced. So
Definitely
it's,
stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all at Crownsmen P. Listen to the podcast on Anchor. Every time I do this. Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
Pocket Cast, Breaker.
So
and
many.
many more.
And
Spotify.
Yeah, and we got the our Facebook group. That's a fun place to be because that's just sort of open. You can kind of come in. It's got lots of our episodes and comments from people.
Yeah.
It's sort of a
Lots
fun
of
place.
discussions
And on LinkedIn as well, we've got the Voice of Industry. Is that LinkedIn group? So lots of places you can get in touch with us.
Yeah.
And Rory is active on Twitter
who was probably tweeting this whole time.
at Rory Bamford. Tell him what you really think. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will see you on the next. I think our next episode, if I'm right, is Ritchie Brothers is on. So that's going to be an interesting show to do. We got the VP from them, and his name is slipping, but we're from me. But that's going to be an interesting episode. We got lots coming on. Thank you again to our sponsors. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Gowdy, for hosting and running the whole operation here.
I'm happy.
And thank you for listening to me. See you next episode.